Hi, everyone. Welcome to the That's Allowed podcast. I'm your hostess, Dr. Adrienne McKeon. And today we're here with Devika Dey. Please introduce yourself, Devika.
Hi, thank you so much. Yes, so my name is Devika. I am a love and leadership coach. And I know that's like, what sort of title is that, right?
No,
So
just to clarify, like the look on my face is like, that sounds awesome. I want to learn more about that. Because of course I'm a creation coach. So everybody looks at me sideways too. Like, what does that even mean? Please go on.
Oh, thank you. So love and leadership. It's well, okay, I'm going to get into that a little later. So, what I do is I help female business owners, women in business. Basically, you don't necessarily need to be a business owner. Basically, use their experience of breakup as a kind of like this radical path to embody leadership. So, generally speaking, I tend to use people's breakups to help them get over imposter syndrome in leadership. Yeah,
well, there's obviously a story behind that.
Yes,
so
there
let's
is.
start there. Where, how did you come to that?
Very good question. Actually, prior to last year, all I was a relationship coach. I just helped women when it came to breakups. That's it. So they were having problems with breakups. They were having problems with kind of moving on. Let's just put it that way. They were in that stuck phase. Like when you go through a breakup, you tend to, let's be honest, go crazy for a bit, and that's totally fine. That's absolutely acceptable. That's acceptable behavior, everyone, to go crazy after a breakup. But then after the craziness, people get stuck, or sometimes they can get stuck. And I help them move past the stuckness. So move past that area that's starting to make them feel a little bit gray in their life. They feel like really depleted. They lack energy. And kind of move beyond that. And the reason why I chose that particular niche in that particular area to work around with people was because obviously I went through something like that myself.
You what?
Yeah, exactly. I know. How could that happen to me after a breakup? So I went through a massive kind of upheaval after my divorce. And my divorce was actually kind of interesting because I had an arranged marriage, right? So I didn't really, so I didn't know my ex-husband, and then I married him. I didn't really know him. Like I knew him a little bit because we like emailed occasionally. But I didn't really know him. And then I got the relationship wasn't too bad, but it ended up going into this really toxic sort of place, this really kind of messed up place. And
can you just give us a little, you don't have to give too much detail, but can you give us maybe an anecdotal example of the kind of toxicity you're talking about?
Yeah, so gaslighting, bullying, all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of really started walking on eggshells myself around my ex-husband because I didn't know what his mood was going to be. I didn't know when his anger was just going to be, kind of unleashed. And it was going south fast, like really fast. So this is actually something I do acknowledge and is, I think, really great, I suppose, for my ex-husband to do for me, because I was at that state in that relationship where I would not have left him. Absolutely not. I would not have left him. I would have put up with any crap because I was at that state where I was like, I clearly am a bad human being and I deserve all this, right? So I was taking it on like no one treats someone like this unless they truly deserve this behavior. So I took it on as like, okay, I'm not 100% and I need to step up and I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I'm going to try everything I can to, not trigger this anger all the time. And he recognized that he wasn't going to stop being angry, and he told me to get out before the relationship got worse. So he recognized and acknowledged that he was going to get violent, and he told me to leave.
That is remarkable, I have to say. I mean,
Yeah.
just I don't know if you know anything about my background. I am also a survivor of domestic abuse. And
No, I
I
didn't
wrote
know
a whole
that.
book about emotional abuse, specifically
Mhm.
gaslighting, that kind of psyops thing that you get into of trying to control someone just by manipulating them emotionally.
Yeah.
And I know exactly what you're talking about with that feeling of, I must deserve this, or I must need someone to control me this way because obviously I'm totally out of control of my own life.
Mm.
And I find it absolutely remarkable that he had the self awareness to say, you need to get out of this or something really bad's going to happen. So kudos to your ex husband.
Yeah, exactly. And when I say that, some people kind of look at me a little bit strange. They're like, why are you giving him the credit here? And I have to be truthful. I wouldn't have gotten out, even if it
Yeah.
went to a place of violence. I don't believe, if I'm honest, considering the headspace I was in,
Yeah.
no, I wouldn't have left. I hate to admit that, but I
I
wouldn't
know
have left.
exactly what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. I luckily had an intervention occur with a friend of mine who pulled me out of it. And I really think, you get to a point where you just, it's like, I'm in this till death.
Hmm.
I'm just going to stay in this until I kill myself or he kills me. I mean,
Yeah,
and that's so hard to explain to people who haven't
it
been
it is.
in
It
that
is
space.
so difficult to explain it to them. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's kind of like people who try to explain extreme depression or,
Mm.
suicidal ideation to someone who's never been there. It's like, of
Mm.
course, when you're not in that state, that's a ridiculous idea. Like, why would you,
Yeah,
want a permanent solution to a temporary problem? But in that moment, in that space, it seems like the only option. It really does.
absolutely. And it
Yeah.
seems like the most sane option.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we could talk about that all day long, but I hear that I can hear that there's a transition point coming here in, of course, that pivotal year of 2020. So let's talk about what
Yeah.
changed.
Okay, so what changed? So prior to 2020, again, I was just working around relationships and breakups and all that sort of stuff with women.
Yeah.
2020 was like everyone else. It was the mammoth year, right? It was the ultimate breakup. It was the ultimate walking away from divorce, if you will. Um,
It's like the
and
entire planet went through a
yeah,
divorce at the same
exactly,
time.
exactly. And everyone hated it. Everyone hated it.
There was, I think, like any divorce, especially from a toxic relationship, it was a really mixed bag.
Oh yeah,
I think for some people it was a huge relief, and for some people it was the end of absolutely the end of the world. So,
yeah.
and everything in between, and all at the same time.
It's so interesting. Like, yes, some people have actually kind of reconnected parts of themselves that they had lost touch with. So, in that way, yes, 2020. And look, the same thing happened to me. I reconnected parts of myself that I'd lost touch with.
Yeah.
Um, what I had lost touch with was my guilt, my
Hmm.
shame, my unworthiness, and my fear, right? All the crappy stuff that, so like literally for 5 years after my marriage, everything was going gangbusters. I was loving it. I was like, yeah, I love life. Like, I was really on top of the world. And then boom, 2020 happens. And it was not like I was trying to bypass all these feelings, but in a weird way, I was bypassing all these feelings. And it was kind of like, okay, you've done enough stuff now. Almost like my body was telling me, my emotions, who knows what else was controlling it, COVID. Um, 2020, something happened where effectively I couldn't go outside anymore to bypass stuff. I couldn't go to lovely events. I couldn't, do face to face workshops with people and all that sort of stuff, that got me out of this space of really exploring the ugly, the yucky, the gross, all that sort of stuff. So I had nowhere to go. And when my city went into lockdown, it all came back. Every single one of those things came back. And effectively, what ended up happening was I kind of fell apart. I was in bed for like 2 weeks. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. it was like going back to those initial phases where knowing that the marriage was over and somehow it was my fault, but not understanding how it was my fault and going through that depressive period again. Um, the good part is it wasn't that long because by
Mm.
that time, when 2020 had happened, I'd already, studied meditation, yoga, I'd studied Qigong, I'd basically learnt some resources on how to cope. And so when
Yeah.
it hit, and it actually hit me really bad, I was fortunate enough to not need to go down the path of medication because I understood what was going on. And, I'd taken on further study, learned coaching, started studying psychotherapy. So it was like, I already knew. I was like, oh, this is what it is. Okay, let's try and find some resources to help you out. And I did. I reached out, I got those resources. I saw an amazing therapist who was lovely. And I went back slowly to my practices, to just the basic stuff, the baseline stuff that my body could cope with. And eventually I was sleeping, I was eating again, I was working again because for a couple of weeks I couldn't work. And it was so interesting being in that space because I forgot what it was like. I absolutely forgot what it was like. And what I then started noticing was, after slowly coming out of that space, was that my personal life wasn't the only place where that level of toxicity existed. It was also in my professional life.
Mm.
And I started noticing a pattern in regards to kind of potentially the partners I'd feel safe with who were not necessarily great for me, as well as the workplaces I'd feel safe with, which again wasn't always great workplaces. There was a little bit of a toxicity in the workplaces I was getting attracted to. And that was then like, whoa, like, when you have that massive epiphany and you start seeing the bigger picture. Yeah, 2020 for me was putting on the brakes to really see the bigger picture and understanding that the personal will absolutely feed into the professional in some way.
I like to call 2020 the year of clear vision, because that was the year where we started to really see things as they were. And all
Mhm.
that noise that we were using to drown out and not look at what was really going on just went away. And all those
Yeah.
distractions just went away. And all we had was our own shit to just stare at. Yeah, but it's so beautiful that you had those tools and that you had that awareness that this is mine. You didn't start blaming, you didn't start saying, oh, this is, it's the pandemic that's doing this to me, or this is how it's my stuff and I need to look at it and I have these tools to process it. That's really wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I will actually be perfectly honest and say my initial reaction was to be like blaming the government for the disease and everything. I have to be perfectly frank. Yes, I did blame people. I even blamed my family. Like, I was like, you guys suck. I got these issues. I totally went down that rabbit hole. But and everyone was like, "You're insane." Clearly, this is the breakdown everyone was expecting at some point. Yeah, but that didn't serve me. And after a few days, I was like, "This is a bunch of crap," and it's a bunch of crap. Okay, you need to now start being a grown up and actually look at yourself and stop acting like a teenager or a toddler or something, like, it's just immature, really immature,
Well,
and
it's
own your
just so
shit.
human. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just so human. It's our go-to. It's like someone must have done this to me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do this to myself.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally went there. But it wasn't for a very long time. It wasn't for a long time. And if I'm honest, I think that in that is actually what 2020 showed me. I needed to go through that because I hadn't been through that and since my divorce. I hadn't gone through
Yeah.
that and hadn't had that experience of, oh, this is what it's like to blame everyone. Because in the past, like prior to 2020, 2019, I was like, I am accountable, I'm taking responsibility, yay me, like, what I mean. I would just
Totally.
absolutely take accountability for everything, and then that lovely immature part of me cropped up in 2020, where I was not willing to take accountability for anything ever again anymore.
Well, I think, like you said, first of all, it was just a little overwhelming for everyone. There's so much
Mm,
going on that it's totally understandable for a while that we just floundered and went, ah, what's going on? I don't know. But the fact that, you were aware enough to step back and say, well, this isn't serving me. I need to do something different. I stand by my original assessment that was a really good way to handle this.
yeah, exactly. And as much as it was so interesting to me to then notice that I kind of resisted starting to take accountability. But the moment I did, it became easier and I was able to gate it as much as I could, given what I was going through. And it was like really starting to look at things from a much larger perspective and really start mapping out the dots. And that was really what was needed. I needed actually to go inwards to that level in order to, you know, really look at the bigger picture and appreciate it for what it was. Um, because it was actually kind of phenomenal for me to sit there and take accountability for like, oh, so this is why I would run away from leadership, or why I would not necessarily speak up in board meetings, or why I would let someone else kind of intimidate me into thinking that I didn't know what I was doing, because I'd been through that kind of, you could say, gaslighting behaviors also at work,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'd definitely been through something similar at work as well. And it was so interesting for me to look at what I went through in my marriage and start to map out what I'd gone through professionally. And I was like, whoa, so what's going on where I honestly just don't believe I'm worthy of having a voice, of being visible, of, all this sort of stuff. And if I'm honest, prior to 2020, my business was very small.
Mm-hmm.
It was very nichey. It was very like circle orientated. It was very face to face. People kind of introduced themselves or their friends to me. Very kind of organic, small business.
Right.
Um, I would never have done a podcast. Let's put it that way. Prior to 2020, there's no way in hell I would have been like, yes, please, world, sign me up to talk about my shit. Like, no, I would never have done that.
Well,
Prior to
I'm so
2020,
glad. I'm so glad that you've come to this, because I think you really have a powerful story that people need
oh,
to hear.
thank you so much. Yeah, it was, and honestly, thank you, COVID, because I would not have gotten there without that time, without that space, without that going back to those parts of myself that I've been running away from for quite a
Yeah.
while, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're pretty far in here, but I always like to start with this question. So we'll just throw this out here. What story is the world not getting?
Honestly, the world's not getting what a gift, I suppose you could say, this rupture has been.
Hmm.
Because it was a rupture. And a rupture is not necessarily a bad thing. It is a hard thing. It is a challenging thing. It is a challenge. But a rupture can potentially build resilience in a way that we honestly cannot build resilience without it. We need the rupture to build that level of resilience, like deeper resilience, not superficial surface level resilience, but kind of internal resilience. That's the bigger picture. That's the message that I don't think people are necessarily getting with this. This is going to help make us stronger, without a doubt.
Absolutely. So how has it changed you? How has it changed your business?
Well, I went from just being a relationship coach, helping women get over, kind of build confidence within themselves again, to not necessarily date, but just actually appreciate their existence and appreciate life, even post divorce, post breakup, post partnership. Um, so I've gone from that to working with business women and saying, okay, you're relationships also where you carry this narrative of imposter syndrome, like you do not deserve a certain relationship, guess what? I'm pretty certain if you're in a position of leadership, or if you're gunning for a position of leadership, there's a message or a voice in your head saying you are also not worthy to be in a position of leadership. So they're basically the same voice, and they're controlling two shows. So we need to address it from both worlds, essentially. So I can't even remember the question, but that's my answer.
I mean, these questions are really just to kind of get you, talking about your story. The bottom line,
Yeah.
you've kind of told us your story, and that's wonderful. Who do you think needs to hear your story?
um Anyone who feels like crap, anyone who feels that they're always just going to live in this place of guilt, in this place of shame, in this place of unworthiness, in this place of fear. um yes, those things aren't the prettiest and the nicest, but from my experience, give yourself some compassion and give yourself some time, and perhaps even lean into things that you love first. And because the stuff that we love, right, the stuff that gets us excited, that gives pleasure in our lives, that can help us cultivate the resilience to then
Mhm.
face the crap. And if you're feeling the negative stuff, please, I'm not saying bypass them. Don't like, it's not a bypass. It's actually moving to an area that's going to help you strengthen to go back. Because I had to move to an area where I had to, really lean into my pleasure and love of existence in order to go back. And once I went back, I realized that all those things weren't necessarily bad. They were just different teachers for me. And I learned a lot from them. And I'm actually incredibly grateful that I have crappy emotions.
See, I think all emotions are wonderful. I really do.
Yeah.
I think even the, the kicking, screaming emotions are there for a reason, you know?
Mm.
And whenever I get one of those like just emotions, I always try to thank it for being here. I say, "Thank you. I appreciate you're trying to be here and try to help me out." And I just kind of give it a moment like, "Hey, what are you here? What are you, why what are you trying to tell me? What do you think
Mm.
you need?" And whatever, answer I get back, I just accept that and go, "Okay, that's what you think you need." Um and if I can give it that, whatever it is, I'll do that. And if I can't, I just say, I hear you. Like, like you would with a friend that you're just trying to empathize with. Like, I hear you. I get that. I can't give you that right now, but I
Mm.
appreciate your being here, you know? And then often just acknowledging it allows it to dissipate. Just that little
Yeah.
bit of processing of saying, "Hi, sadness. I see you there. Do you need anything?" "No, I'm good." "Okay."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
"Hey, anger,
exactly.
what do you need?" Like, "Well, I need you to punch that guy in the face." "Okay, well, I'm not gonna do that, but maybe, we could tell him that this is, like, not working for us." Like, "Okay, try that." Like, "Hey, that's not working for me." "Okay, you got this. I'm good."
Yeah, absolutely. Like that is a beautiful way of kind of saying that as well. Like, you can sit with those parts of you in order to really feed those parts what you truly desire, right? Because they're also coming from a place of desire. Um,
Yes.
and so, yeah, so there was a parts of my desire that I wasn't even engaging with and looking at. And interestingly, those parts of me were around my professional life.
Mhm. Mhm.
Where was that going? And even though I felt happy in, my small business and everything, there was a part of me that was like, almost like, actually, no, that you're not really legit yet. You're not really owning this stuff yet.
Man, I this is so powerful because I think so many women in particular, we put so much of our energy and focus on our relationships
Mm.
because that's the domain that we're expected to kind of excel in. right? It's
Yeah.
like you're supposed to have, good EQ and like feelings and, be good in relationships. But we don't give ourselves that same level of confidence and compassion and work when it
Mm.
comes to our work lives.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I find in both arenas, women almost expect that they're supposed to take on an excess load.
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
relationship, they're taking on an excess load, which is burning them out. In work, they're taking on an excess load, which is burning them out. So we're burning ourselves out at both ends. It's terrible.
Yeah. And often we're doing this emotional labor that we're not even
Mm,
aware that we're doing. And yet it's taken for granted by
mhm.
people around us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even just acknowledging that can be a huge step just to say, hey, there's actually a lot that I'm bringing to the table here that's not being acknowledged. And just
Mm.
knowing that yourself, you don't even have to say that to your boss or your, partner or whatever it is, but just to acknowledge that within yourself and say, maybe I could just let people have the consequences of their own actions.
Yeah.
Maybe just stop protecting them from like the stuff that they did.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? To a certain degree, I think that's the problem. So, for example, if you look at micromanagement behaviors, right?
Hmm.
Micromanagement behaviors is basically an insecurity of the manager or a leader or a boss in their own capabilities of leadership, right?
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with their team. It's got everything to do with themselves. And I hate to say it, but if you look in our personal lives, who are the micromanagers? Do you think it's, our partners or the husbands or whatever? No, it's the women who's like constantly micromanaging the entire show, and they believe that their families will fall apart if they don't do it.
Hmm.
Actually, no. Same thing applies in the professional sphere, which is your team's going to step up. Same thing applies in your family household. Your family's going to step up. Let them fall apart. Let them fall apart. It's good for them because they're
That
going to
is
step
such
up.
great advice. Let them fall apart. I used to be an executive assistant and office manager, and there was this thing that would happen where, once a week, maybe I'd say, I'd get this, text or email or someone just running over to my desk with just like something's on fire. Right. It's like, oh my
Mm,
God, this terrible thing's happening. Like, this is on fire. You need to drop everything and like help me put out this fire.
mm.
And at first, I would be like, okay, I'd drop everything and I'd like jump on it, get to the fire. And inevitably, a little while later, they'd be like, oh, you know what? Never mind. We sorted it out. Right. And so I eventually learned to just be like, okay, that's on fire. I hear that that's on fire right now. I'm here if you need me, but I'm going to let you try to handle that first.
Mm,
And almost always they would come up with something and
yeah.
then be like, okay, it's handled. Great job.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think we should also do the same thing to to our partners, to our families, right? If
Yes.
anything, it's going to increase their level of confidence in themselves. And there's nothing sexier than a confident partner.
Ain't that the truth? I love it. I absolutely love it. So, what would you say is the main message or the biggest takeaway? What do you really want people to walk away with today?
um, hmm. Bad things are not always bad, I guess. Like they always say, yeah, silver lining and stuff. Sometimes it's more than a silver lining. Sometimes it's like full on platinum. It's just amazing kind of material that can come from something that's rough, from something that's not that necessarily that great. Um, and I don't believe that, especially right now, people are getting that message. Yeah, that this is, yeah, it was rough. It was not great, but there's potentially something really amazing that's going to come out at the end of this.
I tend to think that everything, it is all good. Like everything is a mixed bag. The best thing sometimes turns out to be the worst thing and vice
Yeah.
versa. And often it's both. And it
Yeah.
really just depends on what you pull out of it. Now, I don't want to say, because I know so many people lost someone during COVID or, lost a business,
Mm,
things like that. Like sometimes bad shit just happens, okay? That
yeah,
doesn't mean, you have to make lemonade like out of
yeah,
every lemon that is thrown to you. Like sometimes you can just grieve, right? And you can just sit
absolutely.
in that grief and go through that because that's what you need. But the thing is, you need that because
Mm,
there's a gem for you in there somewhere. And I don't know what that is for you,
mhm.
but I do know that it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you actually kind of sounded that out and mentioned that because, yeah, I didn't have it that badly. I didn't necessarily, like, I did lose work for a little while, but it wasn't, folding up a business necessarily.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually lose someone physically. It was just coming to parts of myself that I'd lost or lost touch with, which was
Yeah.
bad enough. So yes, I love that you actually put that clarification out there. And you're right, it's absolutely okay to not want to see the light or not want
Exactly.
to see like a silver lining. It's okay. I was like that for a while, right? I just wanted to sit in the darkness and I just wanted some validation that everything around this was not okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you. I love that reflection and that perspective.
I was just listening to a TED Talk yesterday, and I'm totally forgetting her name, but it was this woman who was talking about her husband who died of brain cancer at the age of 35. And she said, and it always made me so angry when people would say, well, everything happens for a reason. And she said,
Yeah.
I will never believe that my husband died a long, drawn out, horrible, painful death at the ripe
Mm.
age of 35 because I needed to stand on a TED Talk stage.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
not, how my universe works.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I I also tend to find that sometimes people don't grieve. They want to stop
Right.
a lot sooner than they should. And they should totally allow themselves to grieve because it's a natural human process that our
Yes.
bodies, our hearts, even our minds needs to go through.
And that grief takes much longer than people realize. I always
Yeah.
like to describe it as it's like you fell off a surfboard, okay? And at first it's like the waves are coming so fast, you can barely keep your head above water, right? And it just
Mhm.
feels so overwhelming. But then over time, you find yourself closer and closer to shore. And so the waves, they're still coming, but they're much shallower at that point and they're not hitting you quite as hard. And it's like over time you just realize like, oh, okay, I can handle this. I can get back up on top of this one. And then eventually you're surfing again. And
Yeah.
it's still there. That grief is still there. It hasn't gone anywhere, but you've gotten back up on top of it in a place where you can kind of recognize it for what it is, which I think is just love with nowhere to go.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I guess also what you're describing is kind of like you develop a muscle for it.
Yeah.
So you know how to deal with it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, this is about the time where I like to transition and do a little exercise.
Hmm.
So, I'd like to have you close your eyes, if you would not mind, and take a
Yeah.
nice deep breath. Beautiful. And this time, when you breathe in, can you please see some colored light come into your body? And then tell me what color it was.
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting. It just went from like being it's almost like being in a disco, kind of like a multicolored thing. And then as it kind of entered, it just went white. It was like all of them
Mm.
went like kind of blended and boom, white light. Yeah.
Oh, that's super cool. Everyone always has such a great answer to that question. All right. So, one more time, I'd love you to take in that rainbow prism to white light. There we go. Beautiful. And I'm going to go ahead and wave my magic wand over here. And now everything you deeply desire has come to pass. everything that you most want to be true is now true for you in this moment. This is not in the future. This is now. And so I want you to just look around this beautiful, ideal existence that is happening all around you and tell me what you see.
Yeah, I'm basically on like this playground that I'm kind of creating for myself, and I don't really know what this playground's going to be ending up as, but it's like really awesome. And it's kind of interesting. I'm on there on my own, but there's other people around me. So yeah, it's this playground that's in it's interesting. It's not like, it's in like this forest, magical kind of forest kind of area. And
That's so
it
cool.
keeps morphing and changing. So it's kind of fun and
Ah, I love
interesting.
it. This is awesome. So I want you to see someone who's around here who you think could just use a little more play, who's just not quite making the most of this playground.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
want you to just help her to, because of course it's a she, I want you to help her to just really find her fun here.
Okay. So actually helping her find her fun would be to just be with her and maybe mirror her and kind of ask her, oh, what do you want to try out first?
Mm,
Um, yeah, because she's a little bit shy, perhaps, I think,
mhm.
of being there. And, she's a bit shy of coming forward, maybe even making friends. So she's the kind of person who needs people to approach her and just gently, gently um, say it's okay to do whatever you want, because I don't think she's necessarily gotten that message that it's okay to do what I want. She's
Yeah.
waiting for someone to tell her what to do.
So you're giving her that permission. You're validating her now and saying, you can really
Yeah.
do what you want to do here.
Yeah.
And so she does. She starts to kind of break out of her shell. You can see her starting to play a little bit. You can see her starting to kind of find her joy, find her footing in that joy. And then you can see that she's starting to shine. I want you to see her literally shine. And then she looks at you and she thanks you. And how does that feel?
That feels good, but I've also had a lot of fun because she had some great ideas. So I was like, yeah, man, this is great. Woo! So she was wonderful because she taught me some things that I did not know were fun.
Awesome. So I want you to find a space that's kind of your little happy place. This is a place that you can go and just feel completely relaxed and at home and centered. What does that look like for you?
Oh, that's like sitting down somewhere or curling up somewhere with a very good book.
Mm. So I want you to feel you're in a little sunbeam in the comfiest little spot imaginable. And you've got this book that is just a page turner and you cannot put it down. It's so good. Just breathe that feeling in for a moment. And then you can smell something delicious nearby. What's cooking?
Hot chocolate.
Mm. Yeah, someone that you really care for is making you hot chocolate because they know it's your favorite and they know it's really going to make this experience even better to have a hot cup of cocoa. And what can you hear?
I hear like the nature sounds outside, like just, the birds, the trees kind of like on the window pane, um, you know, kind of like other movements of someone else in the house. Yeah, that's, my own movements as well, like in just trying to get comfortable, get into a nicer spot, that sort of thing.
Beautiful. Now, something happens that is just unexpectedly wonderful. What is it?
Oh, the book ends in a way that I was not expecting, and it's just blown my mind.
Fantastic. And what are you going to do to celebrate?
I'm just going to like walk around and tell people I didn't see that coming, but I can't tell you what it is because I don't want to ruin it for you. But it's a really good book. You need to read it. Yeah, that's exactly how I'm going to celebrate it. Just shout out that this is an amazing book and people need to read it so we can talk about the ending.
Fantastic. All right. Why don't you open your eyes? How'd that feel?
Yeah, that felt really great.
Good
That
stuff.
felt wonderful, actually, just kind of going into that imagery of the playground and also of like
Yeah.
going on this adventure. And um, it's so interesting because like a book is how I do go on adventures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I love that idea of the playground that keeps morphing into something new. Like that is so cool.
Yeah, I know. It's like awesome. Wish it
Yeah.
existed. Wish it existed.
Well, what I'd love for you to do, I mean, this is just a suggestion. It's not, no required homework here, but what I'd love for you to do is to just find some images that kind of remind you of that ever morphing playground and
Mm.
a little piece of music that feels like that sort of playful, creative, always changing space so that you can make yourself just a little kind of, short, tiny movie or like slideshow with music.
Ah,
So that when you just need to realign to like, this is what I want to be going on in my brain and outside of me, you
yeah.
can just play that and it'll take you right back there.
That sounds like an awesome idea. I'd love to do that. See
It
what
works
sort
really
of
well.
Yeah, see what sort of magic kind of comes out of that. That would be great.
Absolutely. Well, there you go. All for you, all for free. So, where can the wonderful people at home find you, my dear?
Uh, Definitely on LinkedIn. Like, so look me up on LinkedIn. That is the best spot to find me, Devika Dey. I believe I'm the only love and leadership coach on LinkedIn. My website is hopefully going to be finished at some point, and once that's done, you can reach out on the website. But LinkedIn is the best spot right now.
Okay, fantastic. And of course, I will have the spelling of your name in the show notes so everyone
Yes.
can find you easily. All right. What thought would you like to leave everyone with today?
Um,
How about a feeling? Maybe a thought's too
Cur
hard.
Honestly, curiosity. Like after going through
Yeah.
that experience or visualization exercise, I feel like I can't really articulate things very well, but I'm left with this sensation or this feeling of curiosity. It's like,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yes. Follow your curiosity always.
Mm,
Gorgeous.
yep.
Thank you so much for being here. This was great.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was lovely.